Hello, welcome to Free Fiddle Lessons. Today, as part of our beginner series, we're going to look at how to tune the violin, which of course is a very essential component. So I have here a very out of tune violin. It could be a lot worse. So the violin is tuned mechanically using two aspects usually. The one that all violins have is the pegs here in the peg box. And if you can see, if those strings are wound correctly on the violin, they'll go up and over the peg and then over, or then underneath. And typically, if they're also correctly wound, this peg is for the G string, this for the D string, this for the A, this for the E. Sometimes if you have a violin that you've just got and maybe got from somebody else used, it might not be strung correctly, so that's worth taking a look at. So like I said, you want to make sure the string is going over the peg. And if it's not, you can actually just unwind it and wind it the other direction so it's moving correctly. And when the winding is done correctly, to make a note higher, you're going to move the top of the peg away from you, just a very small amount. We'll talk about that. And if you want to make the note lower, you would move the top of the peg towards you. The other part of tuning that most violins have are what are called fine tuners. And sometimes you'll see a violin that just has a single fine tuner, and sometimes they look a little different from this, but all of them will have little screws, and the other pieces may vary a little bit, but this is what's a tailpiece that has built-in fine tuners. Some of them have something that is just kind of clamped onto the string. They're usually silver. And like I said, some tailpieces just have a single fine tuner for the E string. And in that case, the other strings have to be done just from the pegs. So in this case, on my violin, I use the pegs to make big adjustments in tuning, and I use the fine tuners to make small adjustments. And the fine tuners work by turning clockwise, as like you're tightening a jar lid. And when you tighten the peg, it screws it down into the hole, it pushes on the end of this little lever underneath, which pulls back on the string, makes it tighter, and raises the pitch. So the short version is, if you turn right, it raises the pitch, or clockwise raises the pitch of the string slightly, and counterclockwise lowers the pitch. On the fine tuners, you can really crank a while, sometimes before making a significant difference. On the pegs, you only have to turn a very, very small amount, and you'll make that same difference. There are some kinds of pegs that are called geared pegs, and they have a little gear mechanism internally. So those actually, you still only need to make a very small turn, but they will stay in place more easily. When you turn friction pegs, which is what most violins have, you actually need to often be pressing in while you turn. And sometimes they can be sticky, especially as we're coming into summer. Which we are here in Maine right now. The humidity is going way up, and a lot of people are starting to have pegs that stick. And a lot of people might tune mostly with their fine tuners, and suddenly they need to turn their peg, and it's the middle of July, and the humidity is out the roof, and it can be very difficult to turn the pegs. So if you have pegs that are not wanting to turn, it's best to loosen the string as you're struggling to turn it. Be struggling to loosen it. If you struggle to tighten it and all of a sudden it gives and you move a big distance, that's where you snap your strings, which gets expensive pretty quickly. So we have a couple methods for determining how we're going to tune. I'll start with probably the most traditional, which is a tuning fork. This is a tuning fork for the note A, and that's usually the note that we tune first on the violin, is the A string. So to use a tuning fork, you bang it on something. I'm going to use my hand. I usually use my knee. And you can't hear very much, but if you put it next to your ear, you can hear the note A. And if you bang it, this is hard to do on my hand, and put it on the violin, it will ring the note A. You can also put it on any other substance. I'm going to use my knee here because it's much easier. So I can put it on this table that I have the camera set up on, and you can probably hear that. So anything that will vibrate, and that gives us an A. And so I can tune my A string by comparing the two sounds. So I can hear that my A string currently is lower than the note A, and I can use the peg, and I'm pushing in, gripping the neck with my other hand, pushing in, and I'm going to turn it. You'll see how small. That much. And I've already raised it almost a half step, I think. Still a little flat, meaning not quite high enough. At this point, I might go to the fine tuner and turn the fine tuner. And while I tune the fine tuner, or while I turn the pegs, I will often pluck with my finger, so I have a gauge of, you know, how far I'm moving the note. So I'm going to turn the fine tuner clockwise. Ooh, and that sounds maybe too sharp. Let's check my A again. Actually, it's getting pretty good, but the other strings are so out of tune that it doesn't have quite the ring that I expect it to. So we'll leave the A there for now, because we're going to make some major tuning changes because I detuned my violin. And some of those changing other strings will actually affect the tuning of the A string as well. Also, if you have, these strings I use are called Helicore by the company D'Addario, and they're steel strings. They don't stretch a lot, but many violins are sold with strings that have a synthetic core. Dominance being a very common variety of string that people use that are synthetic, and those will actually stretch a lot. So when you tune them quite a bit, they will then often loosen up and go flat, and you'll have to retune again. But we're going to move to the D string, and actually, before I do that, I'll demonstrate one other way, which is a mechanical tuner. This is a tuner and metronome, and you can select which note you're on. I'm on A, and if I push this knob down to sound, it'll play me an A, and then I can tune to that A like I'm tuning to a tuning fork. Whoops, and it's very quiet. Oh, there it goes. So I can tune to that A. And try to match the pitch. You can also use the pitch of another instrument, and that's actually probably the most common way that I'll tune at when I'm playing with other people, is I'll tune to somebody else playing A. You can tune to a piano if you have a piano. Sometimes people will have pitch pipes, and you can blow into them, and they'll have each of the notes of the violin. The other thing that's really common right now, and has become, you know, accessible and cheap recently, are mechanical tuners. And this is one common kind that's pretty inexpensive. I'm not wild about these for the violin because it's hard to find a place to clip it, and it needs to clip on to something to, not your finger, to register the vibration, and that's how it works. It registers the vibration and then tells you what note you're playing and whether it's sharp or flat of that pitch. They are handy. I've seen some that I think, you know, if I was going to use it on the violin, I would maybe get one of these that clip, you know, on one side or the other of the body and just stay on there all the time, because this isn't wide enough to do that. You can put it on a peg, but then it's kind of awkward. A lot of people I've seen will put it on the end of the scroll here, and then you just kind of need to turn the top, and here we'll turn it on. I'll try to make it so it's visible to the camera. That's going to be a little tricky because it's visible to the camera but not to me. What if we try there? So there are different versions of this. Some have buttons on the back, some are simpler. Okay, my camera cut me off there. Let's pick up again with the tuner. So what I was showing was if you have this button press, you can see the cycles per second. You can press the arrows on this tuner to raise or lower the pitch. This is actually more of a problem than a help for most of us. There are people who play Baroque music often will be tuned to a pitch lower than 440 for those period instruments. But for our purposes as fiddle players, not very helpful. So we just want to make sure that we're set on 440. Because if we're not, we'll think we're in tune and we'll actually be sharp or flat of everybody else around us, because 440 is the current standard. So once we have this affixed to the correct hertz, I think I'm gonna pluck the strings. Normally I will bow the string when I'm determining my tuning, but here it will be easier for us to both see if I'm plucking. So if I pluck the A, I can see that it's mostly reading green, which straight up and down, which is in tune. But sometimes it's going, whoa, that went very far to the yellow. Sometimes it's going into the yellow a little bit, or it was, there it goes, which means I'm a little sharp. So on most tuners, in this case it changes color, but to the right of center is sharp, to the left of center is indicating that it's flat. And we always tune the A string first, and then the D string, and then the G string, and then the E string finally, because the E string is the thinnest, is the most sensitive to the pull of the other strings. And so if we put it in tune now, it'll definitely go out of tune by the time we're done tuning. So we'll go to the D string next, and uh-oh, it says C. Now it is a sharper C, so I'm going to use the peg again. And this is a little more awkward to show you. I'm going to turn it so I can stabilize it on my leg. And then I'm holding now with the other hand and turning the peg away from me and plucking as I go. I'll try to turn this so we can all see. C sharp, D, but it's in the red, it's a little flat. And then sometimes it helps to wiggle the peg and push in. Whoops, I'm hitting the wrong string. So that D is pretty good. I can go back to my A string now. Still a little sharp. I'm going to use the fine tuner and loosen it now. Turn it counterclockwise. And then I'm in tune, more or less. And like I said, we still have the G string, which is way out. So let's tune the G string next. I'm going to do the same thing. So this is G sharp, which means that little pound sign means sharp, which means I'm a half step higher than I want to be. So I'm going to take the peg and I'm going to turn it towards, kind of towards me, top towards me. I guess if I'm looking at the hole, I'm turning it clockwise, but I'm loosening the string on the peg, which will make it flatter. And again, just that tiny turn dropped me almost a half step. Now, because it's simple, I'll go to the fine tuner, turn it counterclockwise to loosen. Okay, and then I'll check this with the bow, because sometimes when I play with the bow, it's going to be a little different. Let's see. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. That's pretty good. Drop it just a little bit so it doesn't flash yellow on me. Same with the D. And then, uh-oh, E string says D sharp. Okay, so let's go back to the peg. We could probably get from D sharp to E, which is 1/2 step, with the fine tuner, but that wouldn't leave me much space on the fine tuner to do other adjustments later. So we'll just do it here at the peg. Again, I'm going to turn away from me, and the E string is the most delicate, it's the one that is most likely to get broken. So I'm going to be very cautious and turn just a very small amount, not an F. There I'm getting closer to E. I'm actually going to keep using the peg. So again, it's very helpful to be pushing in on the string, and now I'll just finish with a fine tuner. And now I'll compare my strings. I could use the electric tuner at this point, but I want to show you one other way of tuning. So I'm going to try and shut this off. There we go. And I'm going to tune by sound. So when I first started trying to tune by sound, this was before electronic tuners, at least before this kind was widely available and cheap. And I would do two things. One is I would play, I knew that my open strings from a low one to a higher one were supposed to sound like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I'd play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And that actually, at that point, that might have sounded just fine to me. It might sound just fine to you. To me, at this point, it sounds not quite right. I think I'm a little short. Well, I should probably check my A again, because that would be helpful. Yeah, my A is a little flat. So let's get the A back in tune. There, that sounds better. Okay. So now let's try my Twinkle Twinkle. And that actually sounds much better. what I would do at, my second level of checking that I learned was to play up my strings as best as I could and try to make it sound like the beginning of a scale. And then I'd play this note and the open string below it, which are the same note name, they're both D. And I'd see how that octave sounded. And it sounds pretty good. If it was out of tune, I'll make it out of tune, it would sound like this. So I'd play, not so good. And then I would change it. Until it sounded good. The problem with that method is you need to feel pretty confident that your finger's in the right places. And how I tune now is I tune my A, and then I do this little pretzel maneuver where I put my left hand under here by my fine tuners or out at the pegs, and I play with the bow 2 strings at once. And I'm listening to the interaction between the strings. And when it's out of tune, it sounds harsh and kind of wobbly. And as we get closer to tune, it sounds less harsh but still wobbly. And when it's in tune, it has this clear, kind of straight ahead ringing sound that is easier to learn by practice. If I make it too sharp, it'll start sounding wobbly again. So they're starting harsh and grating. So if you're interested in learning how to tune that way, what I would do is I'd recommend getting your violin in tune first with an electronic tuner, and then play those fifths, which is the distance between the strings, play those 2 strings together, and then put it out of tune and see what that sounds like, and then see if you can get it back in tune. So that's in tune. You do the same thing here. I can actually tell that the G string is flat, because I've learned that this sound is flat. But if I wasn't sure, I could try turning one direction, so I'm gonna try the wrong way. And it's getting worse, actually. My twinkle twinkle sounds bad. So I'll try going the other way. And there it is. And often people don't turn the fine tuners far enough. So if you're having trouble, and it just seems like it's still not right, you're probably being timid with the fine tuners. You can turn the fine tuner a whole turn and it's not going to make a big change in the sound. Okay, now back to the E string. So there I actually guessed wrong. I tried to make it flatter and it needs to go sharper. So the other tricky thing about this method is being able to play reliably on 2 strings, which is a whole separate skill. Now I'm more or less in tune. I might check my A again against my tuning fork or against another player. Actually sound a little sharp. That's sounding better, and so then I might tune one final time.